Title of today's training presentation is Guarding 2, The Defender Strikes Back. This is the sequel to our original Guarding training presentation. If you have not had an opportunity to view our training presentation, the original Guarding video, please do so. Guarding 2 will get more detailed with more plays and some updated rule changes since our last training presentation on guarding. So here's our agenda for today. Same difference. We're going to talk about the guarding rule, which is the same at all levels, yet different in some minute details for certain levels of basketball. We're going to learn about obtaining legal guarding position. You will see us refer to it with the acronym LGP. How does one obtain legal guard position? Next, we're talking about maintaining legal guard position. How does one maintain legal guard position? And we will summarize what we have learned from Guarding 2. The Defender Strikes Back. Chapter 1. Same difference. The rule is the same for all levels, yet different in some minute but very important details. We are pretty partial to the National Federation High School Guarding Rule because it does the very best job of breaking down the guarding rule out of all the rule books that we have had an opportunity to read about guarding. We're not going to read this rule verbatim. We're going to highlight the high points of this rule. But before we highlight the high points of this rule, notice that the words set, still, and stationary are nowhere to be found in this rule. We say that for officials to understand that you should never use those words to explain guarding to coaches. And those words should not ever be in your vernacular when explaining those rules to coaches and players. This is Rule 423 in the NFHS rulebook, and it's arguably the most important fundamental rule in basketball. Let's just get right down to Article 2 and 3. To obtain an initial legal guarding position, the guard shall have both feet touching the playing court. The only issue I have with this Article A is they should include the word inbounds. You cannot legally guard an opponent if any part of your body is out of bounds or on the boundary lines. The front of the guard's torso shall be facing the opponent. We're going to highlight this in a lot of the plays that we talk about, but your torso has to face the opponent. You do not have to be looking at the opponent to be a legal guarding defender to obtain initial legal guarding position. It is your torso. So after you obtain legal guarding position, here are all the things you can do. You can have one or both feet on the playing court or be airborne, provided that the guard has inbound status. Didn't we just talk about inbound status? The guard is not required to continue facing the opponent. The guard may move laterally or obliquely to maintain position, provided that it is not toward the opponent when contact occurs. 3C strikes the word set, still, and stationary from any vernacular when describing guarding, because you have to be able to move to guard an opponent. The guard may raise hands or jump within the guard's own vertical plane. The guard may turn or duck to absorb the shock of imminent contact. One of the best officials I've ever met, Ray McClure, always used to break this down very simply. After you obtain initial legal guarding position, what can you do? He basically put it simply for us. You can do almost anything except cause the illegal contact. Now you're saying this is not the guarding rule. I know. It's the block charge rule for NFHS. So why is this rule important for the legal guard position? Let's review 2B, because 2B is crucial for our understanding when the defender is maintaining or is no longer maintaining legal guard position. So let's go right to 2B. If a guard has obtained legal guard position, the player in the ball shall get head and shoulders past the torso of the defensive player. If contact occurs on the torso of the defensive player, the dribbler, ball handler dribbler, is responsible for the contact. When you think about that, it makes total sense. And we're going to look at a play that highlights this. This is the NCAA men's guarding rule. The concept of the guarding rule in NCAA men is the same at every level, and it is the same as we just read out of the National Federation High School Rulebook, with one notable difference: the three words "in the path." We're going to discuss "in the path" momentarily. Everything else about the guarding rule, with the exception of "in the path," is identical on every level. This is a continuation of the rest of the NCAA men's guarding rule. Again, it is virtually the same for every level, and it reads almost the same for every level of basketball. But there is a notable difference between this portion of the rule from National Federation High School. Let's look at 4D. When the opponent with the ball is airborne, the guard shall have established legal guarding position before the opponent places the last foot on the playing court prior to becoming airborne. We will view a play momentarily that highlights this notable exception. From the NCAA men's rulebook, this is the maintaining portion of the rule. Reads almost the same as it did when we looked at it earlier in the National Federation High School Rulebook. Again, the one notable difference between this and the National Federation High School are these three words: in the path. We will discuss in the path in this chapter. This is the NBA Garden Rule. This rule is very detailed and very well explained. Again, I'm still partial to the National Federation High School because I feel that it breaks it down a little bit better than rules on higher levels. But again, the rules for guarding are identical for obtaining legal guarding position and maintaining legal guarding position. But the one notable difference between National Federation High School and the NBA are those three words. I want you saying with me: in the path. We did this earlier with the National Federation High School rule book. We're talking about the guarding rule. Why do we have block charge rule in this presentation? Because the block charge rule gives us conditions with regards to legal guarding position. And being able to determine whether someone is a legal guard defender or not gives us the ability to make accurate rulings on block charge plays. This is the rest of the NBA's block charge rule. And because the NBA has more conditions about legal guard and defenders and where they can defend players legally and illegally, including the restricted areas similar to NCAA men, they take a lot of time and care in describing what defenders can and cannot do. But the point of this particular slide are those three words: in the path.
Under the previous NCAA men's guarding rule, this would have been an easy charging foul call since the defender obtained legal guarding position prior to the shooter leaving the floor. This season, under the new rule change, the defender must establish legal guarding position before the opponent places the last foot on the playing court prior to becoming airborne. As we can see from the replay, this defender gets into position a touch late, planting both feet on the floor after the opponent plants his left foot to become airborne, and a blocking foul was correctly called under this new rule change.
I'd like to thank Chip Clark for this excellent and outstanding breaking now of this particular rule for this particular play. It is important because the significance of this rule is the difference between a defender being and not being a legal guard defender for NCAA men. This concept is also for NBA as well. Even though the rule reads a little differently, it's basically the same concept. The NBA rule actually reads under their block charge rule, ironically, that a defensive player is not permitted to move into the path of an offensive player once he has started his upward motion to attempt a field goal or pass. If you watch the 2024 playoff series between the Celtics and the Pacers, I like to call that the Jaylen Brown play.
Welcome to this week's Weekly Whistle. This is Chris Rastatter, NCAA Men's Basketball National Coordinator of Officials. This week's video involves block charge plays with a little twist known as straight line path. Rule 10.1.12 says, when a dribbler has obtained a straight line path, the dribbler may not be bumped, pushed, or otherwise crowded out of that path. When an opponent is able to legally establish guarding position in that path, the dribbler shall avoid contact by changing direction or ending the dribble. Note, if the offensive player changes his path and initiates contact or uses an overt action to clear space, Rule 10.1.12 no longer applies. Let's look at some plays. Blue 3 obtains a straight line path down the near lane line. From the end line angle, it is very apparent that White 0 fails to get into 3's path when contact occurs. This is a blocking foul on White 0. White 23 has obtained a straight line path parallel to the end line. Black 2 attempts to draw a player control foul. From the second camera angle, it is clear that Black 2 does not get into 23's path and creates contact from the side. This is a blocking foul on Black number 2. On this play, Blue 10 attempts to guard White 1, who has a straight line path to the basket. The difference on this play is that Blue 10 gets into White 1's path when contact occurs. Watch as Blue 10 takes the contact in the torso. This play was correctly called player control foul on White 1. White 5 drives down the opposite lane line. In an attempt to draw a charge, Black 2 slides laterally to defend. Black 2 does not get into 5's path and creates illegal contact on 5's side. This is another straight line path blocking foul. On this final play, Blue 1 takes a straight line path to the basket. Similar to the previous player control foul, Gray 1 is able to gain possession in Blue 1's path and takes the contact in his torso. This is legal guarding position and blue 1 is correctly called for a player control foul. On straight line path plays, it is important to referee the defender and not the ball handler. When a defender is unable to get into the path of the offense, it is he who is responsible for the contact, and a defensive foul is the correct call. Thanks for watching this week's video. I hope you learned a little something about officiating this type of block charge play. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
We'd like to thank Chris for doing an outstanding job of breaking down those plays. And again, the significance of this rule is the difference between a defender being and not being a legal guarding defender for not only NCAA men, but for NBA as well. If you've been watching the NBA Finals of 2024 between the Mavs and the Celtics, I'd like to also call your attention to the Jaylen Brown play. Chapter 2, Obtaining LGP. So how does one go about obtaining legal guarding position? Let's look at some plays. Our focus on this particular play is going to be White 3 for North Carolina. After the jump ball, White 3 has obtained legal guarding position. He is currently guarding the BHD or the ball handler dribbler. The feet of White 3 touches the playing court inbounds, which is the first condition for obtaining legal guarding position. The second condition is also met as his torso is facing the opponent. In this play, we're going to analyze the legal guard position for White 4, North Carolina. We can see at this point he is a legal guard and defender, but we're going to analyze his legal guard position much later in this play. As we can see in our freeze frame, White 4 from North Carolina is guarding a potential post player. White 4 has 2 feet on the playing court inbounds, and his torso is facing the opponent. Both conditions are met, thus White 4 has obtained legal guarding position. In this particular play, we're going to analyze the legal guarding position status of off-ball defenders. We're going to analyze the legal guarding position status for White 2 and White 55 for North Carolina. Both defenders have their feet touching the playing court inbounds, and both of their torsos initially are facing their opponents. So by rule, they both have obtained legal guarding position. Remember, it's the torsos that must face the opponent, not necessarily their face. In this play, we're going to analyze all 5 defenders for Alabama. All 5 of our defenders for Alabama have their feet touching the playing court inbounds, and all 5 defenders for Alabama have their torsos facing their opponents. So by rule, all 5 defenders for Alabama have obtained legal guarding position. So all 5 defenders for North Carolina have their feet touching the playing court inbounds. And all 5 defenders for North Carolina have their torsos facing their opponent. Remember, it's the torso, not necessarily their face. So as a result, all 5 defenders for North Carolina have initially obtained legal guarding position. Chapter 3, Maintaining LGP. So once a guard obtains legal guarding position, how does one go about maintaining legal guarding position? Our focus on this particular play is going to be white 3 for North Carolina. After the jump ball, white 3 has obtained legal guarding position. He is currently guarding the BHD or the ball handler dribbler. The feet of white 3 touches the playing court inbounds, which is the first condition for obtaining legal guarding position. The second condition is also met as his torso is facing the opponent. White 3 obtains legal guarding position and he maintains it with his lateral movement. As we can see, it only takes an instant to obtain legal guarding position, and it only takes an instant to maintain legal guarding position. In this play, we're going to analyze the legal guarding position for white 4, North Carolina. We can see at this point, he is a legal guarding defender, but we're going to analyze his legal guarding position much later in this play. As we can see in our freeze frame, white 4 from North Carolina is guarding a potential post player. White 4 has 2 feet on the playing court inbounds, and his torso is facing the opponent. Both conditions are met, thus white 4 has obtained legal guarding position. Let's use some knowledge from the block charging rule to analyze the legal guarding position of white 4. In this freeze frame, we can see that the head and shoulders of our ball handler dribbler are past the torso of white 4. Thus, white 4 is no longer in legal guarding position. As an aside, it is arguable that red 23 for Alabama set an illegal screen, which severely impacted the legal guarding status of white 4 for North Carolina. In this particular play, we're going to analyze the legal guarding position status of off-ball defenders. We're going to analyze the legal guarding position status for white 2 and white 55 for North Carolina. Both defenders have their feet touching the playing court inbounds, and both of their torsos initially are facing their opponents. So by rule, they both have obtained legal guarding position. Remember, it's the torsos that must face the opponent, not necessarily their face. Now, both defenders may move to maintain legal guarding position, which they do in this play. And to maintain legal guarding position, the defenders are not required to continue to face their opponents. In this play, we're going to analyze all 5 defenders for Alabama. All 5 of our defenders for Alabama have their feet touching the playing court inbounds, and all 5 defenders for Alabama have their torsos facing their opponents. So by rule, all 5 defenders for Alabama have obtained legal guarding position. They can simply maintain legal guard position after they obtain it by doing absolutely almost anything in terms of movement, no longer facing their opponents, jumping legally in their own plane, almost anything except for causing the illegal contact. So all five defenders for North Carolina have their feet touching the playing court in bounds. And all five defenders for North Carolina have their torsos facing their opponent. Remember, it's the torso, not necessarily their face. So as a result, all five defenders for North Carolina have initially obtained legal guarding position. Once you obtain legal guarding position, you can do almost anything to maintain it, including no longer facing your opponent, turning around, moving laterally or obliquely, retreating, jumping vertically in your plane. You can do almost anything to maintain legal guard position, except for causing illegal contact. Our final chapter. What have we learned? To obtain legal guard position, the guard shall have both feet touching the playing court in bounds, and the front of the guard's torso shall be facing the opponent. And the key about obtaining legal guarding position, this is the same for every level of basketball. So once you obtain legal guarding position, now you're in the maintaining mode. And how can you maintain legal guard position? One or two. Now the guard can have 1 or 2 feet on the playing court in bounds. Face off. The guard is no longer required to face the opponent. The next movement. The guard can move laterally or obliquely. Jump rope. The guard can raise hands, arms, or jump within their vertical plane. Take cover. The guard can turn or duck to absorb contact. Say what? Very simply, as Ray McClure would say, when maintaining legal guarding position, our guard can do almost anything except cause the illegal contact. And maintaining legal guarding position is the same for every level of basketball. We want to give some shout outs. First, we wanted to thank SlidesGo for the use of this presentation template, which includes icons by Fluttercon and infographics and images by FreePic. We want to thank Chip Clark for his outstanding contribution to this training presentation. We also want to thank Chris Ratstadler for his contributions to this training presentation. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. We hope that you have gained some insight to guarding, arguably the most fundamental rule in all of basketball. Thank you for spending part of your day, evening, or night with us. We hope you have a great day, a great week, a great month, a great year, a great season.